some damage.
People love rivalries. These are really what fuel competition. When you get to see two individuals try whatever their strategy may be, whether similar to one another or polar opposites, their upbringing being from a similar place or possibly from opposite sides of the world. These things really push competition forward because people are just curious what wins, the immovable object or the unstoppable force. So in this video, I'll be going over my top 10 favorite rivalries within all of Smash Ultimate. If you guys have been enjoying the content recently, it would mean a lot to me if you guys subscribe, because only 12% of the people who watch my channel are subscribed and 88% are not subscribed. So like, come on guys, 88%, we can do better than that. But without further ado, let's just get into the video. I also wanted to set one ground rule before I get deeper into the video, and it's that I will never have the same player in more than 3 different spots on this list, because at that point you could just have a hypothetical scenario where I'm like, okay, number 10 is Dabuz versus Mutace. Number 9 is Dabuz versus Esam. Number 8 is Dabuz versus Acola. So the max a player can be on is 3 times. I just don't want it to be too many of the same person. At number 10, we have an age-old rivalry with 2 players who play a very similar role within their region, but are from very different places, and this being Mkleo versus Zackray. Mkleo and Zackray are both kind of these rising star talents to come out of their region and really take over at a very young age. And with Zackray being very dominant in the East, whereas Mkleo very dominant in the West, it was really interesting to watch them play against each other. Their first recorded tournament set was at EVO 2019, and Zackray would unfortunately lose it. He would lose it quite convincingly, but he would get another chance at Super Smash Con that same year. He would then bring it to a game 5, pulling out the Rob in order to take Mkleo out on his 4th game, and this was a very, very, very nail-biter set, and Zackray just barely choked it at the end, and he fell to his knees and began crying as his dark overlord Mkleo stood above him and probably whispered in his ear something like, "You will never be as great as me. You are nothing to me. You are nothing." And Zackray just cried there. A lot of people have called him the Mkleo of Japan, and he was ready to prove that at Frostbite 2020, where Mkleo had been knocked to the loser side of bracket quite early by Prodigy. So Zackray thought, if he's just losing to people like Prodigy, I'm in the top 10. Prodigy's not in the top 10, so I can definitely beat him. And Zackray was extremely close, going up 2 games to 1, but you're not supposed to go up 2 games to 1 against Mkleo, because as the stat says, you are more likely to lose than win. And he lost. You can literally see Zackray's soul be ripped from his body the moment that the screen says game, and I've never felt more bad for somebody in my life, to be honest. This would not be his last opportunity to defeat Mkleo. He would, however, have to wait 2 years, because the next tournament that they would play at would be Smash Ultimate Summit 3 in 2021. And this was the first tournament post-quarantine. So it was really exciting because everybody had new mains. You know, Zackray had been using the Wolf and the Rob against him before, and Mkleo had obviously been using the Joker. But now, Zackray was like, you know what? You clearly were onto something with the Joker, because Zackray now had the Joker. And Mkleo, he was like Pyro and Mithra all the way at this time. So it was really exciting to see, you know, who's going to win with these new mains. Well, Zackray wasn't the one, because he would go on to lose again. The Pyro made swift work of him. They were playing on Yoshi's Story, for goodness sakes. And, you know, Mkleo got the craziest up air combo on Zackray at the end. And then he had the audacity to be like, okay, so here's essentially how I beat you. So I just knocked you out the top because you're a gym and you suck at this game. And Zackray's like, oh, that makes sense. Okay. Zackray doesn't even speak English. Why is he like trying to speak to him? You know? Just watch the sets, bro. They're so cool and so fun to watch. And even though Zackray hasn't won a single time, they're nail biters every time. And I am convinced that, you know, Zackray will get this victory.
Zackray's the GOAT. We all know that, right? Playing him always feels like something else, right? Like, he's the GOAT, bro. Like,
at number 9, however, we have a far closer rivalry, and that is going to be a European and American rivalry of Gluttony versus Kola. These two faced off at CEO 2021, and this was a really cool tournament because it was the first ever grand finals Kola had made it to at a major, and the first ever grand finals that Moist Esports has ever made it to at a major. So it was crazy for him to be even getting this far, but then having to go against Gluttony was really scary.
And Gluttony, my most feared opponent, 51-5 against Flow, always beats Goblin. Goblin's never beat him.
But Kola was able to take the set 3-1.
And I'm very, very happy about that.
And win his first ever major for his org and for himself. And that really kind of ascended who Kola was as a player. But you gotta know, somebody like Gluttony, who's just a master of adaptation, was not going to take this lying down. Their next set would be around a year later at Collision 2022, which Kola would go on to take again in a 3-1 fashion. So now he was up 2-0 on who is considered the king of France's Smash scene. And Glutto clearly was not going to let him get the 3-0 because just a couple months later they would play at Genesis 8. And if you don't know, Glutto made it to grand finals at that tournament and he had to defeat Kola to get there. This is such a sick set, to be honest. It's so back and forth, so close. Glutto gets just the pinky finger hit of the forward tilt on Kola, and he gets one of the craziest screams in his pop-off I've ever heard.
Is going to
What I love most about that clip is the fact that not only just did he scream, but just the guy in the crowd with the French flag just like bro is swinging it aggressively like they just won a war. Like, if I'm Kola, I don't know if I'm even approaching to play the match. I'm kind of concerned, bro. They take Smash seriously over there. Their next set would be 2 years later at Genesis 10, and at this tournament Kola would make the unfortunate mistake of agreeing to play against Gluttony in the French dimension.
I have a special setup right there. You want to go there?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Sure, let's go.
Let's go. All right. After you.
What the hell is this place?
Bienvenue dans la French dimension.
Once you've done that, it's pretty much over. If you see Humming Bee or any French commentator on the stand as you are about to play your set against Gluttony, the King of France, that's just bad enchantments they're sending across to you, and you can't even understand the language. You don't even know what they're doing to you as you're playing.
Si c'est l'idée, clairement, tu couvres l'option, tu te donnes le...
But honestly, this was actually a heartbreaker set if you're a Kola fan. Kola had the biggest lead of all time. He chokes it, gets up aired a couple times, and gets wafted, and that's the game. He dies so early, and it's like, no, Kola. But you know what that means? Now they're tied 2-2. And what's interesting is, you know, every time Glutto has beaten Kola, it's been at Genesis. So for me, if I'm Kola and I see Glutto in my Genesis path, I'm going to talk to the tournament organizer and see just can we get things moved around. At number 8, we have a rivalry that may catch you off guard a little bit, and it's actually going to be Light versus Acola. Now, people may be like, are these two even rivals? But to me, they really are. And I think from a storyline perspective, it makes a lot of sense too. You know, we always heard a lot about this player from Japan, Acola, who would play Steve in a very different manner. He would build walls and sit on the other side of them and mine. And although obviously all Steves do that today, that wasn't really a thing when people first began talking about Acola. And so everybody was like, really? Does that work? Are the people over there just really silly and don't know how to break the walls?
But these blocks, how do you get through?
But we would find out quite shortly that this wasn't the case when Acola first came to the Invitational in America. He cleared through a lot of the American talent at that event, but who we did have in the grand finals to face off against Acola was Light. And this was really the first top 10 player from the West to have a shot at fighting Acola. So this was really what people were waiting to see. Could Light do it? And the answer was no. Light would be defeated in the first 2 games somewhat brutally, but it kind of made sense. He had no prep versus Steve. He would actually take the 3rd game super dominantly, I believe with a 3-stock, and people were very excited. They were like, this means he can do it. And then he lost the next game with a jab, 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 forward smash. So, I mean, what can you even do in that situation? At Smash Ultimate Summit 5, once Acola was a more established player, and I believe rank 2 or rank 1 in the world at this time, Acola would go up against Light going to a game 5. This was because Light began making many adaptations he hadn't made in their original set. He would be going for up throws and then know which side of the anvil that Acola was going to jump off of and getting up airs on him like how he ended the first game. He would go on to land a final up smash on the minecart in order to clear out Acola's final stock and take the set versus him eliminating him at 4th place. So this was just about as cool as it can get, and he was really one of the first players from the West to beat Acola during this time. So when he came downstairs, everybody's congratulating him. People were like, "You're so awesome." And he goes on to do the longest handshake in the history of mankind with Acola. I just find it so sick to watch these two play. So far, I've been saying players from completely different backgrounds, completely different walks of life. But in this specific matchup, I'd like to say two players that actually come from the same region, and that's a lot of what makes it so cool to me. This is actually going to be Shuton versus Zackray. These two players hold a somewhat similar role within their region. They both kind of are these guardians of Japan that really have both ruled in that region at separate times. They've both been above each other and below each other in rank, and they've played an absurd 35 sets against one another, with the lead being in Zackray's favor, but only by 5 sets. Because of the sheer amount of sets, I can't highlight all of them. However, one that I really want to touch on that I think kind of summarizes their entire rivalry in a nutshell is the 3 sets that they had at Wanted in Europe. First of all, we just got to talk about that in and of itself, because at a European tournament in France that, you know, all the greatest French and European players were in attendance of, the top 3 was T, Shuton, and Zackray, 3 Japanese players. Like, that's just wild in and of itself, but you would go on to see Shuton versus Zackray in the winners finals of that tournament, and Zackray would kind of wash Shuton in a 3-0. So a lot of people would be like, oh, maybe this isn't as close as it is. But once Shuton fell to the losers bracket, he would defeat T pretty easily so that he could get right back to fighting Zackray, and he did. But now he was on the loser side of Grand Finals, so he would have to win 2 sets. And he won the first one 3-1. So now we're going to a true finals, Zackray versus Shuton, and it went all the distance. It went to a game 5 last hit scenario, and Zackray just had to rob all of the soul out of his opponent as he would go on to defeat Shuton in the 3rd set that these two would play at this tournament. Again, these two played 3 games, then 4 games, and then 5 games. At the same tournament, these two played 12 games against each other. That's insane, bro. I just think it's super cool to watch these two play because it's almost like they're fighting for their region, you know, and for the pride of being the best in their region at the time that they were. Alright, at number 6 we have another matchup regarding Mkleo. This is going to be Protobanham versus Mkleo. And I just think this is a really cool rivalry because you just don't know what's going to happen when you see these two play. It's actually insane. They would first go on to encounter each other at CEO, and this was back when it was only best of 3 stage in the bracket because they used to not do best of 5 as much as they do today. And this was when Proto was on the Lucina, Mkleo was on the Joker, and this is one of the most well-known historic sets of all time just because of how close Mkleo was to losing it, and he did the Mkleo Classic and was able to bring it back. But that would be the last time that they would play pre-quarantine, and Mkleo would just defeat his opponent, make it to Grand Finals versus Mars, and you know the rest. However, moving forward, you would go on to see these two play once again at Smash Ultimate Summit 4, where Proto would defeat his opponent Mkleo 3-1, eliminating him at 4th place for the first time in over 2.5 years at this time. This is what really kicked off their rivalry to many people, and it's not just the fact that he eliminated him so early, although that definitely plays a huge role, but also Proto's style really threw off Mkleo. Leo was obviously going to just stick with the Pirate Mithra as he had been playing her a lot at this tournament, but Proto, still the Lucina from earlier, but also a new character, Min Min. And every single game he would alternate from one to the other back and forth, and it was really odd for Mkleo to adapt to, and he struggled with it heavily. Now that their set count was tied up, they would go on to play again in 2022 at a tournament called Double Down. They would play 3 sets at this tournament, which is kind of wild, and the first set just kicks it off insane. Mkleo had recently just been kind of bored with the game, so he had been just playing around with Corin. He said that he only tried her out because he was having fun with her on his streams, but once he made it to Protobanham, people were like, okay, I don't know if this Corin's gonna work out. Game 1 starts Corin versus Lucina, and Mkleo nearly JB4's Proto. He does 3-stock him, and even his first 2 stocks, he didn't take a single % of damage. It was actually one of the most absurd things I've ever seen. The commentators were screaming,
Call in the Min Min immediately.
Yeah, man.
which he did do. Then, to make this even crazier, after Proto just got destroyed, once he brings out Min Min, he destroys Mkleo, and he actually was go on to be victorious at that set.
Guys, we didn't even get to a game 5.
Not even a game 5. Game 4, Leo thwarted here by Protobanham.
Guys, you really look at how that first game went. I don't think anybody might have had Proto pegged to take this set.
So now Mkleo's in the loser side of bracket. He has to crawl back by beating T, and then he makes it back to grand finals. And he does something nobody expected, not picking the Joker that he used in the crew battle, but instead picking Rob! What? So then the Mkleo Rob comes out and has a super insane starting game 1, just blowing his opponent up, but then it gets really close again and he almost chokes it, and then somehow he is able to take the game and take the set, and now is a true finals, Mkleo's Rob versus Proto's Min Min, and Proto is able to just barely squeak it out with a neutral air with the meatball megawatt, and he does one of the most sporadic pop-offs I've ever seen in my entire life. I think some people thought he was getting electrocuted. You know, EE even mentioned
That young man is probably going to get escorted out.
And just the adaptive style of both players would mean that every time they played, they picked different characters. It's just really interesting to me for that reason, but that's why it is going to be number 6 on my list. Then we have another really close rivalry for the number 5 on this list, and it's going to be Acola versus Miya. And these two are both like the very new generation of Japanese talent. Of course, you know, now we have Doramigi, but these two have played a lot more than Doramigi has with either of them. And it's just really crazy. These two have played 26 sets against each other, and it's quite close, with 10-16 being the score in Acola's favor. What I really like about a rivalry like this is that you will often see when two players have played so many times that it's not so much about the character and more about the playstyle of the opponent. So you'll even see them try out strategies that they may not otherwise. For example, you know, obviously in the majority of sets, Acola has played Steve, but in a couple of them, he has even brought out the Pyra and Mithra, which I think is really interesting. And he's won sets with the Pyra and Mithra as well versus Miya. And Miya pretty much across the entire board has stayed Mr. Game Watch as well as Incineroar.
Now the Incineroar comes out. Miya says, I could do it on your character. I can do it on this random character.
Some things just can't be split. I don't know what they're doing in Japan, bro. I don't know. These two play two of the most broken characters in the game, and it's just kind of cool to see those two styles against each other, and I feel like they're always at odds to determine who is the best in Japan. Technically, Doramigi is now ranked above either one of them, but, you know, I think they both know that they can climb back to that position, and it's just a really interesting rivalry because of this. Next up, we have another group of two friends, and these two are likely even closer friends than the last two, but rather being two American talents, and that's going to be Light versus Cosmos. And you really can't get much closer when it comes to friends, because these two are not only players that play with each other all the time, whether it be in doubles or just in friendlies against each other, but also they literally have a podcast together. These two are the Lights Out co-hosts. So I think that these two have so much practice against each other that other people just don't know about, because they technically only have 10 tournament sets. And their score is 7-3 in Light's favor. So it's not necessarily super close, but I think on any given occasion, you could see Cosmos take the set over Light, as he's done at certain tournaments like Shine. And I think the only reason he's lost his past 3 tournaments against Light in a row is because he just hasn't been playing as much Smash Ultimate, so he's not as warmed up the most recent times he's fought Light. But I think at his peak, there's literally 50-50 odds. I remember at Shine, it was so crazy in the grand finals because you would go on to see Cosmos just get these random down airs that it's like nobody would ever know that Light's gonna recover in that way, except for somebody who's played him all day, every day. And you can tell that Cosmos has. It's funny too, because on the Lights Out podcast, Light is always criticizing Cosmos and saying like, you just didn't play good, bro. You just suck, bro. And then whenever they fight in bracket, now Cosmos has a chance to prove himself or prove that he really does suck. So it's just funny for that reason as well. I think they also just have this collective goal of improving the strength of the American Smash scene. Light's like, bro, you can't suck because then America sucks. Like, you're making us look bad, bro. So you just gotta get better. And I think that's just a cool point of motivation. At number 3, we have our third set with Mkleo, and it's going to be Mkleo against Spargo. This is such a cool rivalry to me, because people don't even know, maybe you know, like, okay, they're from Mexico, and, you know, Spargo's like the new Mkleo, because Mkleo was just this young buck coming up, and he was only like 19, and he was just taking over the game, and nobody could stop him. And then Spargo's doing a similar thing these days. But you don't even know to the extent that Mkleo is connected to Spargo, because you could even watch old esports interviews with Mkleo way back when he was uncontested #1 in the game. And he would talk about this kid, Spargo, like he was the second coming, you know?
A lot of players that are really good. But I would say there's 2 players that I'm still... There's 3 that I'm looking forward to. Meme, the Yoshi player, to Big Boss, and the third person will be Spargo. Of course, he's really young. I think he's like 14. So I can see him like being really good in 2 or 3 years. But once he gets that experience, I think he's gonna be really good.
And people just did not understand what awaited them. And he was really trying to make it clear to people, like, there's this kid out there, bro. And he trained him up. And even at the tournaments where he would defeat Spargo, such as Smash Ultimate Summit, he would still say, like, this kid's gonna be the best in the world in the future. Like, I promise you that.
Man, he literally got no experience.
Yeah.
He just came from being a Wi-Fi warrior, man. He is going to be the best in like 6 months. I'm calling it.
Right.
And now look at things today. Like, can you really argue it? All their matches are iconic. Their first tournament set would be at Smash Ultimate Summit 3. And what was really interesting was this whole tournament, Mkleo was going Pyre and Mithra, and he's going Byleth. And then he runs into Spargo and he's like, this kid I gotta take seriously. And he brings back the Joker. And this set goes to a game 5. The last hit is insanely close, and Leo somehow gets the combo into the up smash. And it's like the classic Leo thing, right? At Smash Ultimate Summit 4, Spargo would defeat Mkleo once and for all in a set. Once he was able to do this, he'd really crack the floodgates wide open, and then they would go on to play at Genesis 8, and this was the most crazy back and forth. These two are flying around the stage at each other, just beating the life out of each other, and Mkleo would go on to take it there as well. At Smash Factor 11, Spargo would beat Mkleo, but then Mkleo would beat Spargo at Watch the Throne in the winner's side, but then he'd lose to him in the loser side. This is one of the craziest things ever. They would go on to meet, meet at Kagaribi 13 in the loser side of bracket. And just to make this, as simple as possible, these two players from Mexico would both go on to become world-renowned talents. Then they would meet at the biggest tournament to have ever happened in Japan. They both fly to this tournament. Then they both run through the bracket, both get knocked to loser's bracket early, and somehow their two brackets align where they have to play each other to make it farther in the tournament. And Mkleo obliterated Spargo in a brutal 3-0. He just was swagging on him. He broke his shield like it was crazy, bro. And this was really a decisive victory. But of course, it wouldn't stop there, as then Spargo with 3-0, Mkleo at get on my level. So, the rivalry still rages on to this day, and it's just so exciting whenever we get to see these two. Now at number 2, we are going to have Tweek versus Mkleo. I know I said I wouldn't do the same player more than 3 times, but come on, what can you do? I lied. How was I gonna only put Mkleo 3 times, bro? I was not gonna do that, bro. You can control me. What I find so sick about this rivalry is it didn't even begin in Smash Ultimate. These two have been beefing forever. They're like an old married couple. Way back in Smash 4, when Tweek would actually always be Mkleo's demon, because Tweek had a secret weapon, Donkey Kong. Yes, there was a game that Donkey Kong was good in Smash. There's even a clip of Mkleo asking Tweek, as he would write out his username, he would actually instead type messages to Tweek saying like, please don't do this. And then Tweek would say, too bad, I'm gonna do it, or something like that. Like, he would be responding in the match.
Please. Cloud. He needs Cloud's help. He backed into a corner. Oh, wait. No.
And these two have always had a rivalry with one another, so it's really funny that they still do in Smash Ultimate. And it's really interesting to see timeline-wise how it has gone, because in the grand finals of EVO, which was the biggest tournament ever at this time, Tweek would go up 2-0. And if you don't know about Mkleo, the worst mistake you can ever do is go up 2-0. Mkleo would then go on to beat Tweek 6 games in a row and humiliate him on the grand final stage in front of everybody. And I think this made a permanent stain on Tweek, because even in the future, for example at tournaments like Super Smash Con, Tweek would go up 2-0, and I imagine you can fill in the rest. And then at Frostbite 2020, Mkleo would go down 2 games to Tweek. So we all know what happens. Mkleo would then reverse 3-0 him. And this would be the last time that they would play before the quarantine. And once we came out, Tweek was a new man. He would go on to fight Mkleo at Smash Ultimate Summit 3. He would 3-0 Mkleo every single time they played at this tournament, brutally. It was crazy. It was like every time he would go up 2-0 like he used to in the past, he would be like, wait, what if I just won one more game? And he would do it. So I don't know why he didn't come to that conclusion sooner. I think it was clear on both sides that things have shifted. Even the fact that when Mkleo would beat Tweek that he would pop off. This was a guy that you used to beat in your sleep. You would be like, I'll give you the first 2 games and then I'll start trying. So just the fact that he's like grabbing his coach and he's just running around, like that's not somebody who you just casually beat. And a fun fact is, after that Low Tide City victory over Tweek, he would never beat Tweek again. It's been 4 years. That's bad. Tweek would go on to defeat Mkleo at Collision 2022, and he would take out all the rage that he'd been building up against this individual out on the poor chair. And I really don't know why he did this, but then he would go on to have a very reminiscent moment of his old rivalry from the past with Mkleo, where he would go up 2-0 against Mkleo at Smash Ultimate Summit 5, and Mkleo's switched from Pyramithra to Byleth, simplified everything, and things started going very well for him. So now he took the next 2 games, and it was looking like a reverse 3-0 was over the horizon. It's game 5, and Tweek just barely squeaks it out with the banana into the forward tilt. And this is what many people would consider either the greatest set in the history of Smash Ultimate or one of them. So that actually does mean that their set count is currently tied up at 11-11, which is just absurd that they haven't played, and it's because Tweek retired from the game for a little while. So we were gonna never know who takes the lead. But luckily, now that Tweek has returned to the game and they are both registered to go to Port Priority 9, we will be able to finally see who is going to be better in the history of the game and beat the other one and really settle the score with this rivalry. I'm so excited and I hope they bite. But anyways, that's why it is going to be number 2 on my list. And you might be thinking, how could anything be better than that? That's literally like a storybook rivalry that spans multiple games. It's because nothing matters like what happens at home. And that's why the number 1 rivalry in the history of Smash Ultimate is Light versus Mars. Light and Mars were 2 New England Smash players that came up around the same time, and it's because they were close friends. And I think it's so cool to see these 2 players both kind of come from the bottom and not really be anything at all and just be local rivals that now have both progressed to such a high point in competition where they have both been ranked number 1 in their continent at different times, and all they want to do is just be ranked above the other one. That's the entire point of their rivalry. You know, Light once, after winning against Spargo in the grand finals of SmashCon Fall Fest, said, yeah, you know, winning against Spargo was cool, but that's not really what matters to me. I've got trouble at home. You know, I could care less. What was most important to me was beating Mars.
You gotta play against Mars.
Yeah,
that was
sure.
some
My
shit
brother.
right there. I mean, what goes through your head in a moment like that? You're like, yo, I gotta take my boy out.
Anger, but not like anger towards the set. It's like I refuse to lose to him.
Okay.
Because it's like, we got the world ranking going on, right?
That we do.
But you gotta think about, when it comes to me and Mars, it comes to back home.
Okay.
And I hate that number 2 on my name.
Okay,
It don't matter if I'm top 10 in the world if I can't secure my own home. Like, I gotta be the best where I'm from too.
And I think that is really such an interesting metaphor for Smash as a whole, because we maybe can't all relate to fighting an international opponent who has a completely different playstyle and background to us, but we all may have this local rivalry in whatever we do that starts out very, very, very small and very local. And I think it's cool to see these 2 because it did start out that way, but they've gone far past New England now. But they still have this same rivalry from back home, and that's really what matters to them more than anything. If you ask either of them, they just hate the other one brutally, and they want them to be defeated and to know that they're worse.
You know what's the best part? You know they hate each other too. Like, no, I'm just being real. They play with hatred in their hearts.
And I think it's cool that even when they like fist bump, it's like Goku and Vegeta fist bumping. Like, these 2 couldn't be bigger rivals. And so that's why it's going to be number 1 on my list, because at the end of the day, it's less so about where these people come from and more so about the history that they have. And although that they could achieve all these accolades, nothing means as much as being the best at home. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'm really curious to see what you guys think are the best rivalries in the history of this game down below, because it's just a topic that is super duper interesting to me. But I want to really quick, before the video is over, give a big shout out to Wally Winker for being the first ever tier 2 member on the channel. And I think I'm going to do a members only tournament pretty soon, because I said I would do a tournament for my viewers when I hit 1,500 subscribers. And I feel like I got to give some reward to the members, because I just don't really have that many incentives in mind right now. And that was one of the ones I could think of. But if you guys have more ideas in that department, be sure to leave them in the comments down below. But overall, I hope you guys enjoyed, and see ya. At Smash Ultimate Summit 3.